So welcome today to this webinar. I'm Christoph van Tomme. I'll turn on my video a little bit. I'll turn it back off. It's a little bit into it. So I'm Christoph van Tomme. I'm the CEO of Pronovix, and today I'll be talking about what is beyond API developer portals and kind of like looking at what is our ultimate objective with APIs and developer portals, and how can we achieve that? And I'll be doing a presentation that I've prepared a little while ago. That's based on a presentation that I did at the Postman conference. But it's I'll weave in some new insights that I got from an interview for the API Resilience podcast that I did last week with Michael Heibe about affordances. But that's not part of the slides yet, because I'm still figuring out how to express that. But I'd love to have a conversation with anybody who feels like a little bit later after the initial presentation, if you want to go into that. So I'm gonna turn back off my video so that I don't have to be busy about how my hair is and stuff like that. And I'll just get started with the slides. Okay. So first of all, I think it's really important, and this is nothing new. This, if anybody who's been working in IT at enterprise organizations, or who's been trying to improve their life with technology, will be familiar with the tool trap. It's this idea that I'm just going to start using this magical technology and it will solve all my problems. And often that is, I think, well, that's one of the dangers that you need to really be watching out for when you're adopting APIs and when you're starting to work on your API program. So where did I get the ideas for this presentation? One of the inspirations was a conversation I had with Kin Lane about 1 year ago, just before the lockdowns. I met him in San Francisco, and we were talking about generally the API space and what's going on. Kin Lane, he's also known as API evangelist. He's he blogs. He's a very prolific blogger with a great following in the API community. He's a visionary. He's looking ahead and looking at bigger potential of APIs, also as a tool for humanitarian reasons and a bunch of different things. A very interesting person to check out writing of. And he told a story about one company that is a Postman customer that was doing something very interesting, because they had APIs for some of their internal systems, and they had some of their analysts using APIs to extract information or to get information out of APIs, and they were doing that with a Postman collection. So basically, a developer had at some point explained to the analysts how to do this, and now the analysts were using Postman collections to extract financial data out of APIs so that they could build their reports, which I thought was really, really fascinating, because it showed how the lines between what you need developers to do and what regular people can do with APIs are blurring. And this is part of the low-no code thing that a lot of people are very excited about. But I think in a lot of cases, low-no code is told as more of a tool story, where you have a low-no code tool that helps you to implement these kind of things. But I think it's more than the tool. I think it's about looking at how can we take APIs and turn them into building blocks that regular people can use. Another story that inspired this thinking was KBC's developer portal. We met them, I think, over this is more than like a year and a half ago, I think. We started talking with them, first I couldn't talk about the story. I was really excited about it, so I asked them, like, please, can we work out something so that I can talk about you, because I think what you're doing is very innovative and very interesting. So then I became an influencer for them, which is interesting. So I can talk about them publicly. But if you go to their dev portal, developer.kbc.be, they have something very interesting. They have both business solutions and developer solutions on their developer portal. And the business solutions are things like QR codes or widgets. I've taken the example of the QR codes because that's like fascinating how they're using that to trigger a digital journey. But they also have like widgets that you can insert into your page, into your website as a small business owner. Basically, what it allows small business owners to do is to create digital journeys that are connected, but also sufficiently disconnected, and that don't require any deep integration to happen, but that still allow an entrepreneur to create, or like a business developer to create a journey that integrates some of their offering into the experience that the entrepreneur's customers are having. So if you go and buy an electric bike, you can scan the QR code and check if you can apply for a loan for your electric bike, and you can maybe already order your insurance for your electric bike, for example. So this was another story. And then the third one, this is one that I've seen. This is something I started thinking about. Like I saw Apogee. So Apogee, which is one of our key partners, they got acquired by Google Cloud, and Google Cloud also bought Google App Sheets at the time. So now I think it's now called Google App Sheets, which allows you to take a spreadsheet and turn it into an application. And it's kind of like a no-code tool that allows regular office workers to create their own applications using either some sort of storage in the background, could be a Google Sheet or something, or even an API and like an app. And I attended one of their webinars because they were talking about how you could start using Apogee as a source for these app sheet applications, for these low no-code applications, which I thought was really interesting and exciting. So if you put all of these things together, it feels that like we are ready to take like the next step in this journey towards turning APIs into the information highway for our businesses and for the broader society. And as I said, like on the API Resilience podcasts, I've heard several stories going in that direction that are talking about like how can we really fulfill the potential of API programs? How can we really get to value rather than just we have integrations? And I think that's what I want to talk about. This was in a former incarnation. This was a presentation at Postman's conference, as I said. It was titled "Developers are Pioneers, Not Unicorns." So that also gives away a little bit of the content for the talk. Okay, so. But what is the full potential of an API program? Why are we doing all of this? I think it's the developer portals often are seen as kind of like a documentation site, but I think that they can be more. I think they can be a way of reducing cognitive loads in your organization and creating a better organization that is more streamlined around value flows and value streams, and that is using these interfaces as ways to abstract some of the complexity away, so that individual teams can be highly functional, but also fairly independent when they're executing tasks, and that you can like hide away some of the cognitive load of the rest of the organization so that people can focus on the jobs that they're doing inside of the context that they're doing. But first, a very short word about our company. So we are Pronovix, I'm supposed to say Pronovix, because that's easy to remember. So Pronovix, we are a company specialized in developer portals. We run the Devportal Awards. If you haven't heard of them, go and have a look. If you have a developer portal, you should consider submitting your developer portal for an award. There's a bunch of new categories this year, also with internal developer portals. So, and this is going to be the hardest one to get applicants for. So if you have a cool internal developer portal, or something you would like to share with the wider community, or get some feedback on from our jury, please consider submitting. One of the key things we do is to be able to be a thought leader in the space as an organization. We've been doing the API to Docs conferences, where we invite people to come and talk about API documentation and API programs and their developer portals. And we run two podcasts. One is an API to Docs podcast, which Laura Vash runs, together with, I think it's mostly Annette, but there's been a couple of other colleagues that have been joining to help on that, and the API Resilience podcast that I run. And yeah, we also participate in a bunch of other communities to learn and to bring back knowledge from different places of the tech scene. One of the key things we believe is that launching a developer portal is more than just a technology story. That is a journey, and we help our customers with the whole journey, not just with a SaaS solution, but we can build something that is addressing all your needs, and then also that is also based on open source software, so you don't get any lock-in effects. Yeah, that for the introduction of our company. So, but what is a successful API program? So we've been thinking about this question for a while, and last year I came up with this maturity model, and it's basically it's spread over 3 dimensions: operational maturity, developer experience, and business alignment. And then there's different stages that that I see where you'll be evolving inside of these 3 dimensions. It's not like, how to say, it's not super linear. It's more like, there's these 4 stages for sure. There's these 3 important dimensions of maturity. We've seen people in different places, in different dimensions, like being in different stages. But it gives an idea of like what are you looking for, and where can you start and where can you finish. And this model is based on a first phase, which is the project phase. This is typically when a company does like a first API and is looking for a way to just publish the documentation of a first API. That's probably run as a project. So the organization just starts doing APIs. Product phase, where an organization starts treating APIs as products, and where the developers know that they should go and look for APIs rather than talk to a developer that they do an integration with. Then the third phase, where you have a full-fledged API program, where you start scaling this whole effort, and where developers go and check for existing APIs before they start doing their own stuff. And as I said, APIs don't create value, people do using APIs. The fourth phase that I originally had was the interface program, where regular folks go look for interfaces before they ask a colleague, like, how do I get this information? There's a place to go look for that information in the interface catalog, and that's how you get started. Now, the thing I was alluding to in the beginning of the presentation, right before the technical trouble, is that I had this conversation with Michael Heibe last week on the API Resilience podcast. because he had tweeted this really interesting snippet, which was that you don't need an API catalog, you don't need a service catalog, you need an affordance catalog. And so, and I'm thinking about adding a fifth stage to the program, the affordance program, and because I think like in the fourth stage here, in the interface program, people have gotten the habits to go and look for interfaces rather than to ask a colleague like, so for example, I've had it often that I contact, so I want to start a partnership with a new partner. So there's a company that I would want to discuss like, hey, how could we become partners? And instead of really looking for some sort of automated way for doing that, my initial instinct is to just go look on LinkedIn and find a partner person, or just contact the CEO or the CTO or something like that. And I believe that so basically we're used to doing this person-to-person way of connecting with organizations, where teams are connecting through people with each other. And I believe that what we are doing with APIs is that we're switching this over from a people to API, or even a machine-to-machine kind of connection, where you don't necessarily need a person to be the intermediate for an interaction with an organization. And the reason why I'm really excited about affordances and that story that I mentioned earlier is that this is going one step further, because here in the fourth phase in the interface program, you're looking for existing interfaces. In the fifth phase, in the affordance program, you already know about the affordances that you have. You already are aware of the things that you can do with the technology that is available in your organization. And you might have to look it up, like exactly like the details for something, but you already are familiar that certain interface exists, and at your technical level, be it a developer or a business developer, or an assistant, or wherever you are on a technical scale, if you are able to use those interfaces or not. And I'll be talking about this more. I'm currently working on a presentation about this for the API Days conference. But as I said, I'm still digesting the information. But I wanted to bring it up because I'm super excited about this. So, but back to the interfaces. So what do I mean with interfaces? Interfaces can be pretty much anything where you're on the you're on the boundary between different parts of the organization or between organizations, and where there's either a programmatic interface or could be QR codes, SDKs, apps, widgets, pretty much anything that allows people to do certain jobs. And the way that interfaces create business value is that they allow for two really important sets of changes that organizations have to make today. One is organizations are supposed to be close to their customers. You're all familiar with application development. APIs are a key driver for that. But there's another part, which is the adaptation to complexity and the ability to quickly change how your organization does things. The ability to adapt your organization, and these two big changes, I believe, is what APIs and interfaces help organizations to deal with. Creating digital proximity, as I said, the archetypical example is the switch from physical banking interfaces, going into a bank, and I'm more looking for the word affiliates. Well, a bank office, or using your app. This is digital proximity, and what you're doing is you're replacing a people-to-people to computer interface way of working to a direct customer to computer interface. And like there's direct-to-consumer initiatives are all over the place. This is especially since COVID, this has become even more important. But then the other part is this adapting to this changing world, because the world has become the space of change has increased in the world, and the complexity of the world has increased because there's more players globally interconnected with each other. The world has become smaller, the speed of change has increased, and because all these different players are much faster connecting with each other and reacting much faster on each other, from a world that was seemingly static, we're now in an unmistakably dynamic world where you just need to provide people the tools to be able to adapt quickly. Very short. This is a graph that I got from. This is like going around in DevOps community. This is the idea about what kind of problems exist, and I believe that from a dominant, complicated world where you could have best practices and you could have a clear plan and then just execute on the plan to get somewhere. We are now in a complex world where you can't just blindly execute on a plan. You have to probe, sense, and respond. And you can have emergent practices, and you can have like ideas about how to do certain things and have patterns for that. But you can't just blindly follow a guide to get where you want to go. And I believe that APIs help with this because they allow you to push the ability to create processes to the people that are interacting with your markets, rather than to have to centrally dictate how your organization is going to work. You can create platforms of capability platforms that allow people to react much faster to changing market conditions. I think this is also the reason why in one of Gartner's latest reports, they talk about internal developer portals as, or internal API programs as like the thing that is really hot right now, because internally you are able to change the structure of your organization and to create a more like an organization with less cognitive overload, so that teams can react to changing circumstances around them. It's all about accelerating adaptation, I believe. So when we do APIs, I believe that what we're in fact doing is something that, like, I'm a bioengineer by education, so I'm always looking for examples from biology of how biological systems deal with information and organize for complexity, for complex adaptivity. And what's really fascinating is that if you go look for complex adaptive systems, you almost always see a decoupled system, or like cells and interfaces to other cells. So basically, you're containing the cognitive loads, like the information that needs to be processed by any single unit. You limit that, and then you create systems that help to spread messages that need to be known by other parts of the system through interfaces. So I believe that what we're doing with APIs is we're creating decoupled teams and interfaces so that we don't get this highly interdependent organizations that are very difficult to change and that can't really adapt to what is going on in the world, but we're creating much more nimble teams that can quickly adapt to what is going on in the world. And as I said earlier, I believe that this is all about information flows and how to deal with information overloads, how to deal with cognitive overload. Because I don't know what you're doing in your organization, but in our organization, we're using Slack, for example, and there's just a barrage of information on any given moment that is flowing through this network of people, and it's to such an extent that it actually becomes too much sometimes. And I believe that what APIs can do is segment parts of your organization so that you can have a rich interaction happening on a smaller scale, but still get relevant messages spread throughout the organization when you go one level up in the structure of the organization, and then further up and up and up, so that you can still have transparency without cognitive overload. But to be able to do that, you need to be able to amplify and deliver the right messages to the right recipients. And I think that's what APIs do. And this is very similar to what cells and receptors do in biological systems. On the cell surface, there's receptors that will be triggered by different hormones, and it will know what to do when there's a trigger happening and arriving into individual cells. And I think this is why every single organization in the world eventually will have to do APIs, because it is about a restructuring of our information landscape to allow us to become more adaptive, and becoming intentional about interfaces, because there's no organization that is not yet using interfaces. Everybody does. We all have some form of interfaces already today, but becoming much more intentional about it and learning how to separate intentionally different groups from each other, and how to do that, and what kind of APIs to expose on the edges of those teams. I think this is what, or the big challenge that is lying ahead of all of us in the next decade. So, but practically, or some ideas about what kind of interfaces you might need. I think the key thing is that people don't look for APIs, they look for abilities. So it's to look at what kind of abilities you might want to have. And there's I've thought a little bit about this before, and I think that there's these three areas. One is like the organization level. Do all your teams communicate through APIs already or through interfaces? If not, could you create interfaces between or at the edges of your teams? Like a very common example of this is like KPIs and OKRs that allow you to create a better constrained boundary around teams and allows them to interact using those interfaces. Then for your product, do you have interfaces, and are those interfaces at the right abstraction level? What I mean with that is if your product has a complementary usage where developers would create bespoke experiences, and there's the right market for that. So like if you're dealing with enterprise customers or where there's a large enough value, then you probably want to have a programmatic interface like an API. If you're dealing with small and medium-sized businesses that might not have the budgets to build integrations with APIs, you might want to have a widget or some other less technical interface. Like making sure that people will have a good return on investment when they choose to work with you using any of these. And then the last one is what market niches do you want to address? And are there any kind of interfaces that you want to address are currently missing? And could you maybe help to create those and to become a central contact point for those interfaces? And then again, the value of API is not how you can do an integration, it is what you can do with it. And this brings us to this other idea that I mentioned it in the beginning, that developers are not unicorns. Developers are pioneers. What I mean with that is that there's this almost idolation of developers that sometimes happens. Like when we're talking about developer marketing, sometimes you get this feeling that people or organizations really don't understand market like developers. So it becomes like, people start almost treating them like unicorns. Like we need to be really careful around these people and they're kind of weird. But I don't believe that that's the case. I believe that developers are actually showing us the future. They are in two ways. One, they're the people that go out there and figure out what kind of interactions are necessary, what kind of new interconnections could be of value for your organization. So they're the pioneers that create the new pathways that you can then later build out and work further on. But developers are also pioneers because they're much more in tune with what is going on in the digital ecospaces, and developers already experience today what the general public will experience tomorrow. And this there's the attention economy that we currently start living in. They're experiencing that much stronger, and they will accept less. They don't want to be manipulated. They want to be educated and learn what capabilities you have, and they want like an honest take on where you are as an organization. And I think that's I believe that that's what the world in general will be like in the future. We have an interview that we'll publish in a couple of weeks with Abdul Nuvender about his new book, Developer Marketing Does Not Exist, and that talks also a bit about this. And yeah, this also talks to that concept of developers not being unicorns but pioneers. And that makes APIs exploration devices that help you to find the right interfaces that you should have as an organization. And this is I mentioned this earlier, the KBC story. Katrien van Hezel at KBC has this really interesting quote: "Business developers are developers too." And I really, really strongly agree with this, because I think it shows us the path, not just for our API programs, but especially for our developer portals. Making sure that both business and technical audience are addressed is essential. And as I mentioned, you can see this business solution in action on the developer portal from kbc.be. So I think this means also that thinking about your developer portal from this perspective, not just from okay, we're just gonna throw our reference documentation onto this website, and then developers will find it, but to really consciously think about how you're going to manage your API program and how you're going to help to evolve it into an interface program or an affordance program. I think that's why you should pay good care about how you do your developer portal, and to think about how are you going to structure it, and be very intentional about that, about how you're going to map what people understand about your organization, or how you would like people to think about your organization into the developer portal that you're building, and so that you can make interfaces discoverable and findable, and so that you can show what you can do with your organization through the interfaces that you are exposing. And this might even be with some human interfaces, but thinking about finding some new way of expressing. So rather than right now, when I want to find out how I can interact with an organization, I have to start doing archaeology. I have to go and figure out on their websites what kind of programs do they have? Do they have a call to action that addresses my need? Maybe I need to go and do some digging on LinkedIn to find the right person. What if we would be able to clearly declare our interfaces as an organization, so that people wouldn't have to do this guesswork, and that we could just point them at this interface catalog and then slowly but surely teach them how they can interact with us, so that more and more this becomes an intuitive thing, so that they don't even have to look at it anymore. And I think that's why I believe that interface portals will become as important as branding websites. I believe that the next, this is already happening. More and more organizations do have developer portals. I don't know yet if these portals are going to be called developer portals or interface portals or still something else. I don't know that yet, but I strongly believe that this is where all of this is heading, and that the journey that you have started with your organization, building APIs and creating a developer portal, this is where that is going to lead. This is going to become an essential piece of your business, the backbone of your information infrastructure, a tool to help people figure out how they can interact with you. So if any of this sounds interesting, and I'd love to go into a little bit of a conversation now, actually keep it here a little bit. I'll freeze the screen. So yeah, if you, what does this spark in you? Does this make sense? Do you see this also? Do you have any questions?